Hey guys, quick little video here to show you how you might start to create a graph based on your hypothesis. Um, this lab report's a little different from other forms of the scientific method that we've been looking at because you've collected your data, right, and then you create a hypothesis. This is a little backwards, right? You're not technically supposed to do this, but with some data, what you can do is test your hypothesis using graphical or mathematical analysis. And that's what we're going to try to do with this data, is develop a hypothesis and then test our hypothesis mathematically or graphically to see if there is in fact a relationship between the variables that we've identified. So in order to do this, you need a little graphing mastery course, right, in Sheets, and that's what we're going to do right now. Hopefully you've set up your data sheet somewhat like this, right? I'm actually using Jackson's data as a proxy, so thanks Jackson in advance for letting me use your data. And I know that you guys with Mr. Casey hopefully set up your data sheets somewhat like this. Basically, what you have is you have the dates here, tree numbers here, and I've organized them by type of tree. And instead of writing the name of the tree up here, I've just color coded it, and I have a key down here, right? To color code different cells, you click on the cell and then click this little fill button, right? And you can fill it with whatever color you want. So if you think that'd be useful for you, you can definitely utilize that. It certainly makes your data more aesthetically pleasing. So in order to figure out the relationship between different variables and this data that we have, we're going to need to take some averages. So I'm going to walk you through how to do that in a second, but I also want to point you to this website, Weather Underground, right? You may have gotten to this part in class, but this is basically going to be a great resource for you guys to figure out what's happening. Let's see, we'll be in Plymouth. There you go, Holderness. Right, figure out what's been happening on the days that we took data, right? So you should have the dates that we took data. And if you go to history for Holderness, New Hampshire, this little tab here, come on, right? You can basically plug in any date up here and it'll give you a bunch of different data from that date, right? So say you decided that you wanted to see whether wind speed affected the phenology rating, right? You could go back and find the average wind speed on each date and plug that in for your data, right? So for me, if this is your hypothesis, please do it. I'm going to show you how to do it for temperature here, but I basically made up average temperatures for each of those dates. You will need to go to Weather Underground and figure out what the average temperature is for each date, but I made them up, right? But you can easily do that here, right? Mean temperature, 24 degrees, right? Go ahead and plug that in. So what we're going to do is create a new data table that our graph is going to be created from. And in this data table, I'm making it right down here, you're going to have your x-axis, right, your manipulated variable. So this is going to be, for me, temperature. For some of you, it might be wind speed. Also on this website, you can see the time of day, right, if that's something you're interested in looking at. Lots of things you could pick to look at here. Precipitation, sea level pressure, really interesting stuff that you could actually look at if you really wanted to. Right, but that's going to be your x-axis, so you want it the farthest to the left. And then the best way to do this is, remember, these are average temperatures on specific dates. So this is the temperature on date 1, here's date 2, and date 3. And we want to translate this data over here, okay? But having all these numbers together is going to be hard for the program to read. And it also doesn't tell us much about what's going on. So instead of using all of the data for each American beach, I'm going to want to do the average for all American beaches on that date. And then I'm going to do average for all red maples, and then average red oak, and average white oak, okay? So the way that we take averages, there's a mathematical formula we can do. You type in equals, and then you start typing the word average. And you see how it kind of showed up with these options? I'm going to click average, right? And then I highlight the cells that I want to take the average of. Close parentheses, enter, right? And this is the average of these cells, right? These 4 cells on that date. And if I go ahead and grab my, right, if you, let me show that to you again. Right, so I'll do it for red maple, right? Average equals average, cells I want the average of, close parentheses, enter. If I highlight this cell and I go down to the corner and I get these little crosshairs, do you see those 2 little crosshairs? And I drag them down right through here, it's actually going to take the average. This is the average of these 3 cells, or these 4 cells. So Sheets is a pretty smart program. It knows since I took the average of these 4 cells, if I drag it down, I want the average of these 4 cells, which is pretty cool. So it makes your life super easy. You only have to do this a couple times. Do it again, average. Now we'll do the red oaks. Go ahead, find my little crosshairs, drag that down. And then average equals average. For my white oaks is going to be these. Close parentheses, enter. And if I drag that down, again, I'm going to get the averages all the way through. Cool. So now I have, this is a little bit more manageable for the program to read, which is awesome. And now I can create my graph. So if I go ahead and highlight all this data, go up to Insert, Chart. So Sheets thinks it's pretty smart, right? It's going to try to give you what it thinks you want for a chart. So it's decided, maybe this data they want us to do a bar graph. We don't want a bar graph, so you're going to go to Customize Chart Style. Oh, hold on. Where'd it go? Oh, here we go. Chart type. We don't want a column chart. The chart that we want is called a scatter. That's actually going to be our best bet. And we have to do something here to get it. It thinks that we want our tree type to be our x-axis, and we actually don't. We want our average temperature to be our x-axis. So we're going to have to click and unclick a few things here to try to figure out. There we go. Right, so now if you unclick switch rows and columns, right, now we've got average temperature as our x-axis, which is what we wanted. We've got our phenology ratings over here on the y-axis, and we've got our different colors showing our average for each of the different tree types. So that is perfect. Then you're going to want to go to Customize, and here you can play around with all sorts of different things. For those of you that have used Sheets before, you probably know more than I do about this stuff. So I'm excited to learn a little bit from you. But one of the main things you want to do is change your chart title, make it something descriptive, right? So effect of temperature on leaf drop, right, is what we're looking at in deciduous deciduous trees. Right? We could say phenology rating here, but what we're really concerned with is leaf drop, right? These ratings are kind of non-consequential. Horizontal axis, we've got a nice title there, average temperature. One thing we want to make sure we add there is units, and that's degrees Fahrenheit. Vertical axis, this is phenology rating, so go ahead. Phenology rating, and pop that in there. Cool. All right, so how do we make sense of this, right? How do we turn this data into something we can make conclusions about? One of the main ways that we can do this is by adding trend lines to see if there's a relationship between X and Y. So if you go into the series bar here, series, and you click on all series, you click add trend line. You want to add a linear trend line, right? So this is showing you the trend on each different leaf drop, right? So for kind of interesting here, the white oaks, right? The line goes pretty much through each of the points here, which shows you that that's pretty much a linear relationship, right? The temperature drop is directly linear to the leaf drop, which is kind of cool. With some of these here, though, right, the blue line doesn't seem to really match up with the the trend here, not exactly linear, and same with the white too. But all of these are sort of showing that there is some trend that is right. They have some slope, right? If these lines were perfectly horizontal, right, that would tell us that there wasn't really a relationship between temperature and phenology rating. So this is a good way to start reading your graph and start figuring out, like, is there a relationship? And the relationship that we're seeing here, right, is subtle, but it's saying as temperature increases, right, so does phenology rating, right? And we saw that as the temperature decreased in our environment, right, the more leaves dropped, right? So our phenology rating decreased. So this is, you should be creating a graph that looks something like this, and then starting to read it, right? Starting to interpret it in some way. So for homework tonight, I would like you to at least try to create a graph based on, maybe you won't use average temperature, maybe you're using some other variable, but at least try to start it. This stuff can be tricky, right? You might run into some snags, but I encourage you to replay this video, pause it, right, in places that might be tricky, and you should be able to come up with something that looks similar to this. All right?